Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Kavanaugh's Corner. I'm Andrew Kavanaugh. As always, I wanted to thank you for coming back to my channel and watching my videos here. Today is going to be an interesting video. I was planning on doing this for a while, but I want to kind of go into a little backstory here. I was introduced to Steven Seagal about 10 years ago or so, maybe about 12 years ago now. And Steven, when I was younger, was kind of an inspiration to me because I was into martial arts and stuff, and he was kind of an Aikido master. And then as I grew up, he kind of fell out of popularity and really became kind of a name that is now kind of synonymous with direct-to-video garbage. And honestly, I have kept track of almost every movie that he's ever made, and I've actually seen basically every movie he's ever been in. And I was very excited to hear that this summer would kind of be, for lack of a better term, the summer of Steven Seagal. He has like 5 movies coming out this summer, 2 of which have already come out, actually 3 of which has already come out. One of which is not out on home video yet, but when it comes out, I'll probably either rent it or buy it. I guess you could say I'm a Steven Seagal fan, but I've now kind of watched his movies just to kind of laugh at him, because his movies are increasingly awful. And I want to talk about one today, the most recent release of his, which is called The Asian Connection, or just Asian Connection, I guess. This is another direct-to-video movie where it's actually kind of funny. This is the second one in a row of his that he is featured on the cover. Now, if you look at this cover, you may even think that this is a movie starring Steven Seagal. It is not. It is a movie with Steven Seagal as a very minimal role, and he's actually the bad guy. Now, if I were to tell you that this is a Steven Seagal film, and you just picked it up off the rack and read the actual synopsis on the back, you would think that maybe this guy is the main character. Steven Seagal is not. He's actually the bad guy. I'm not ruining anything by telling you this, but pretty much Steven is a drug lord that has questionable motives, not the smartest character. Actually, all the characters in this movie are increasingly stupid. But I'm going to just kind of leave that for a moment. Pretty much, the story is this guy here, who I like to refer to as Discount Bill Paxton, is a bank robber. Him and his buddy rob a bank in Thailand, and actually all throughout Southeast Asia, actually. And they end up stealing Steven Seagal's money. Steven Seagal then, of course, sends out a guy to go find his money. That character then forces the guy that robbed the banks to rob more of Steven Seagal's banks where they hold his drug money in order to steal money from Steven Seagal. First of all, the story is absolutely ridiculous. I think it makes little to no sense because the guy that is sent out to find Steven Seagal's money, if more money is being stolen and he's the guy that's supposed to go find his money, doesn't that make him kind of suspect number one right off the bat? And doesn't that kind of screw him no matter what happens? But it is a really ridiculously stupid movie. First and foremost, let's start with the writing of this movie. The writing of this movie is truly atrocious. It may actually have been written in another language and like Google translated into English, because some of the lines in this movie are so incredibly stupid that no English script should be written this poorly. It is really awful. Ironically, Seagal is the one guy that walks away looking the most knowledgeable in this film, and even his character is pretty stupid. There is some awful acting in this movie. Seagal's acting is actually the highlight of the film, which is really scary. Discount Bill Paxton is truly awful, and his girlfriend in the movie, is even worse. And we're talking about softcore porno levels of acting. It is truly, truly awful. On top of all that, the characters are very dumb. One of the bank robbers is actually like the signifier of a horribly stupid bank robber. They yell each other's names during the bank robbery. One of them doesn't wear any gloves and touches multiple things. These guys would have been caught after one robbery. Again, it does take place in Southeast Asia, so maybe that's how poor their police are, but I don't know. I'm gonna let you in a little secret here. I literally have 2 pages full of notes. That's how fucking awful this movie is. So if I look down, I'm trying to find what I wrote during this movie, because this movie is that bad. There is a totally unnecessary voiceover by the female character in the film, and she is just as bad doing voiceover as she is regularly acting in the film. She is terrible. She is a fairly good-looking lady, but that's pretty much all she's there for. It's kind of a shame. The funny thing, too, is that the character motivations that she has in the movie don't match up to what she says during the voiceover, which is really hilarious. Other than that, I mean, Seagal is having a lot of fun in this movie. He actually plays a guy, I can't make this up, I had to write it down separately here. He plays a guy named Gan, or Jan, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Gan? I think it's Gan, G-A-N, Sirankiri. That's actually his name. His name is Gan Sirankiri. That's a real name in this movie. Funny enough, I don't think anyone actually ever calls him by his name. I think they mention that name once throughout the entirety of the film. But I mean, Gan Sirankiri? This is Gan Sirankiri? I don't know. I think it's funny. He's wearing basically black pajamas, sunglasses, and a do-rag through most of the film, which is amazing. But he basically goes from being like this peaceful guy. He spends most of this movie with an Asian chick who he's obviously banging, and they suggest that he's banging throughout the entirety of the film. But he'll go from, like, there's one scene, I'm not spoiling anything here, there is one scene where he's talking to this girl about these roses that he grows in his garden, and then one of his henchmen tells him that more money of his has been stolen, and he instantly goes from talking elegantly about roses to literally threatening to bury his flower clippers into somebody's eyes. That's this movie. Like, that's literally like that could basically signify this entire film. That could summarize the whole movie. It is just a mess. And I love it because at multiple times throughout the film, Seagal basically just loses his goddamn mind and launches into these swear-laden diatribes, and they are incredible. They are completely incredible. I think he swears more in this movie than he ever has in his entire career. It's amazing. One of the banks in the movie that the bank robbers actually rob is basically, it's a gas station. And they don't even try to, like, hide it. Like, it's literally just a gas station. It looks like they're robbing, like, a 7-Eleven that's made up as a bank, only it's, like, smaller. There is some of the worst special effects I've ever seen. I've seen other, like I said, I've seen almost every Steven Seagal, like, direct-to-video movie. There are some truly awful shootouts in this movie, and you can tell they're not even firing the guns. Like, they're just going like this, and like the sound effects and like the special effects of the guns firing are added in later. That's literally the entirety of the film. It's almost like they only had money for like airsoft guns, so they add in like the gunshots and the actual like muzzle flares after the fact. I mean, literally, I think it could be done that they did all the special effects in this movie in Adobe After Effects. I kid you not, I think that's actually how they did some of the stuff in this movie. It is really awful. On top of that, the finale of the film, and again, not giving away the finale, because honestly, you really shouldn't see this movie, but the finale is got to be the most unexciting car chase ever. The parts of it, like the music just cuts out, and it's just cars, like one shot is like Seagal like sitting in the passenger seat of this giant truck for no reason, and somehow the truck keeps up with like a BMW. It makes no sense. Again, there's actually a scene, in that scene actually, Discount Bill Paxton, and that's literally all I'm going to refer to him as, Discount Bill Paxton, because that's really who he is, leans out of the car and starts shooting like this rifle, and you can clearly see where the round should eject from the rifle. As he's shooting it, the gun is shooting, like the special effects are added in to make it look like it's shooting, but there's no shells coming out of the rifle. And it happens literally 2 minutes later with Seagal shooting back. They end up in like a warehouse, and somehow he finds them because, of course, Steven Seagal is all-knowing. And Steven shoots a very similar rifle. It's probably the same rifle. They probably didn't even, afford a second rifle. But Seagal is shooting this rifle, and again, the same things happen. There's no rounds being ejected from the gun, and it's like right there. It's right in front of your face. It's like unexcusably bad editing and sound effects too. Seagal actually speaks some lines at the end of the film, and the sound effects, not the sound effects, but the sound editing of his voice at the end, because I guess they just couldn't get him back to redub the lines at the end, or they just couldn't afford to get another actor to redub his lines, which has happened in almost all of Seagal's direct-to-video movies. You can tell that like his background noise doesn't match up with the audio that's the other characters are speaking. It is like amateur hour shit. I mean, it is really bad. I mean, honestly, I think I do a better job at my audio editing on this program than they did with this movie, and that's kind of sad because I am no audio editor extraordinaire. I'm not, but it is really, really awful. And the ending is terrible. The ending is this downbeat, like, somewhat surprising ending, and it is really awful. I mean, it is a truly awful ending. Not even like an ending that I would say is like a satisfactory ending. It's a really bad ending. But it actually kind of pushes your expectations for this film, because the ending is, like I said, it's somewhat serious. Funny enough, I think it's hilarious that really that one of the story writers that gets actually story credit is actor Tom Sizemore. Actually gets a story credit for this movie. I don't know if he wrote it in one of his like rehab stints or whatever, or drug. I don't know. I think he's doing time right now for, I don't know. But he actually has a story credit for this film, and it's actually Tom Sizemore. It's not another guy named Tom Sizemore. It's really Tom Sizemore. So I don't know what that's about. I guess the really only positive thing I can say about this movie is that the movie was actually filmed on location. I mean, it's actually in Southeast Asia. I don't know. I mean, I really don't have anything else to say about this movie. Seagal is still pretty much a mess. He's really the only good thing about the film, and he's barely in it. It is nice to see Seagal play a bad guy again, but honestly, it's not a very interesting film. It's a very boring film. The action is not even decent quality. I mean, it's really poor. The acting is awful, with the exception of Seagal, who's never been an Oscar winner, let's be honest, but at least he's watchable in this. And he moves around, which is nice. This was awful. I guess the only kind of person I could recommend to see this is if you just watch it, you want to watch it just to see how bad it is. But not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's pretty close. It's an awful, awful piece of crap. Well, this is my first review where I would definitely give this movie an ugly. It's not great, it's not good, it's not even bad. This is an ugly, ugly movie. And honestly, I couldn't recommend it to anybody unless you want to just laugh at Steven Seagal being pissed and swearing at people, because even he really doesn't do much in this movie. Well, anyway, it was nice having you back on Kavanaugh's Corner. Until next time, we'll see you. Bye-bye.